I'm not going to take up very much of your time. I'm not going to preach. I'm not going to proselytize. I'm just going to deliver some information and some insight that I find fascinating and stimulating, and I think delivered in this environment there's something about just being in this higher state that I do believe more truth and wisdom can always be downloaded into this head, and I believe it's available for all of us, and that it's never exhaustive. There's always some new way of hearing something, even if you've heard me tell this story before. I don't think most of you have heard this, but I'm going to start it off by saying there's some remarkable, let's sanitize this from spirituality, shall we? Let's get out of airy-fairy spirituality and go direct to hard and fast science. What do you say? So many studies in neuroanatomy and neuroscience nowadays about what it is that leads to heightened states of consciousness. Two of the things that they're studying actively around 1970, 71, and I don't mean to offend your sensibilities very much, but somewhere around 1970, 71, Nixon and the crew, they decided to outlaw psychedelics because it was turning a whole generation of people into wild lunatics, and it was ruining society, and no one was being responsible, and everybody was moving into communes, and nobody was going to vote for Republicans ever again. So what they did is they outlawed psychedelics. And so, but the thing about psychedelics is they really opened up brain space. They opened up new ways of seeing reality. They made many people realize that this one so-called reality that we're living in right now is one of billions and billions of them. Isn't that crazy to think? If I'm addicted to anything, I'm addicted to my version of reality. This is it, and the way that I see it. But anyway, so now they're starting to study psychedelics again. Now, another thing that they're studying, because it's happening so often, and if you're in the medical profession, perhaps you've seen this or been introduced to this, but there's something that I'm a huge fan of, and I've studied a lot, I've read many books on it, near-death experiences. Near-death experiences I find incredibly fascinating, and it seems to me like there's so many people having this and we're hearing about it for two reasons. One is the extraordinary ability to resuscitate people better than we used to. Back in the day, you didn't have a near-death experience, you just had a death experience. It was done, you were done, bye. So you weren't really coming back telling stories, but now they're coming back. And also now, because of YouTube and social media, everybody's telling these stories. And it's like, one of two things is going on. These people are delusional, and these are the dying gasps of brains that are on the way out, or one of the things that they're discovering in neuroanatomy, and I find this incredibly interesting, is that heightened states of consciousness, expanded levels of being, whatever, spiritual awakenings, whatever you want to call it, they're beginning to discover, paradoxically, astonishingly enough, that they're not associated with increased brain activity. They're associated with decreased brain activity. Isn't that wild? You would think that when you were tripping out on LSD, your brain would be fired up and it would be just glowing on an fMRI. It would be going like crazy. But this is not the case. One of the things they're discovering, they've discovered this just in the last 14 years, because many more people are going into MRI machines now. So they're able to do brain scans of people in a variety of different psychic brain states, and what they're discovering is whether it's psychedelics or whatever it might be. And they've also studied this with Buddhist meditators who are extraordinarily adept at meditation and achieving these higher states of consciousness. What they're discovering when they look at the brain when people are in this state is the brain is not more active, it's shutting down. It's slowing down and stopping. In other words, like many great spiritual masters have said, and now neuroanatomists have said it, we're wearing lab coats and clipboards, our brain doesn't produce consciousness, it filters it, it narrows it down, it sort of takes an infinite amount of potential experience and narrows it down, well, to me. Infinite consciousness narrowed down to Greg, and your infinite consciousness narrowed down to you. Now, this is very convenient. It's hard to be processing all of infinite reality when you're a mortal human being. It gets a little overwhelming. For me, just this little teeny part of reality that I'm experiencing right now damn hard to manage sometimes. Sometimes I do it well, sometimes I don't. But what they're discovering in essence is that slowing the brain down is the key, and one of the ways we expand and we open up new portals, new levels, new information, new understanding. And it's a shocking and stunning recovery. Now, do I recommend having a near-death experience or taking a whopping dose of psychedelics to have such an experience? That's up to you. You decide. But if you do go there, send me a postcard. I'd love to hear about it. I've done my share of psychic exploration, and all I'm going to do is share my experience. But along these lines, even though this is modern information, I will say there's a yoga story from 2,500 years ago that perfectly explains this. It's crazy. They knew this a long time ago. How the hell did they know it back then, before there was an MRI machine? Well, I'm going to tell you, because this is, I don't care how many times I hear this story or how many times I've told it. Maybe you've heard this before, but did any of you go to Yosemite or Hetch Hetchy today? No matter how many times you see it, it's always, it's like you've never seen it before, right? It's always something new and magical and mystical. So this great spiritual story that I'm getting ready to tell you, no matter how many times I hear it, it's as if I've never heard it before, because it's so much higher than my general, normal, mundane state of human consciousness that even if I grasp it in one gulp, I can't remember it. It goes away because laundry, I have to feed the cat, I've got to lead yoga retreats, got to pay taxes, and I got problems. So there's stuff I got to work on. So that being said, but the ancient yogis, well, who were ancient yogis? This is what the hell is yoga? Why are we doing this thing called yoga? I don't even know what yoga means. Yoga is Indian people laying on beds of needles? What is that? Why are we doing yoga? Well, where did yoga come from? Yoga was invented in 1492, just kidding. No, but yoga, think of, there's a river that goes from the Himalayas and it runs down through Pakistan and India. And I've got Gita, and she's gonna correct, if my bullshit meter goes off, she's gonna correct me on the story. Okay, so she's staring right at me. You can move over, just kidding. So there's this river that comes down, and you know how it was 3,000-4,000 years ago? Where did cultures aggregate in order to build civilizations and start agriculture? Big rivers, Nile, Tigris, Euphrates, and then this river. I'll give you the name of this river in a moment. But there was this culture that grew up around this river, and they got into language and being able to cuneiform, that kind of stuff, just ancient language. And so they began to develop. Now, what's interesting about this culture that grew up around this river, that I'll give you the name of in a moment, is oddly enough, most of the other cultures on the planet that were really growing and thriving, they were kind of militaristic. It was when you got a lot of power and you learned how to make brass swords and chariots, the best thing you could do was go over the hill and kill a bunch of people over there and take their stuff. This is the purpose of humanity, is get a lot of stuff and take it from other people and control and dominate them. Thank God there's none of that going on nowadays. That's what I really like. But now, this weird culture that grew up around this river, God only knows why they did it, but this culture, they decided, we're not going to conquer the outer world, we are going to conquer the inner world. What does that mean? Well, they decided that they would meditate and that they would go inside and explore psychic states of mind. And in terms of human history, they're the first culture that really did this in terms of it being recorded, writing it down with oral stories, that sort of thing. They decided, instead of going over the hill and killing them and taking their stuff, they would explore the inner world to see what's going on. What a remarkable thing that went on. Now, why did they do this? Some say it could have been a mushroom or a plant or something, that maybe they ate it and it brought them up into these amazing states of consciousness. Maybe psychedelics did it. Who knows? That's not the point. But what happened is there was a certain group of people that began to do this diligently, generation after generation. And what happened? As a result of doing this, they began to experience what you would call enlightened or higher states of consciousness. they began to see through what we would call normal reality. They began to see through the veil of reality. Well, how do we know that they did this? We'll get to that in a moment. But this was even pre-language. So they told these stories of how to meditate and what their experiences were. And also this story that I'm getting ready to tell you was delivered for many generations orally. It was so embedded in their mind. Thank you for nodding your head up and down. Thank you. This is a wonderful confirmation. Because now, this same story that was being delivered 2,500 years ago by these people that I'll give you the name of in a moment, it's getting ready to come out of my face. And now, it's largely the same story, the same experience, because there's nothing new under the sun. But what happened, these ancient yogis, somehow, some way, when they went inside, they were able to. Remember I was talking about that funnel, the funnel of consciousness, how it gets smaller and smaller until oh, this is me. I'm little teeny thing over here, and everybody's kind of looking like through a straw. But for some reason, it opened up their consciousness, and all they did is they saw everything. In other words, they went from individual, personal, mortal consciousness to infinite, cosmic God consciousness. That's all. That's all that they were able to accomplish. Now, that's such a weird, radical, hard to understand, alien state of consciousness for most of us. Maybe you've had little glimpses of such things. Maybe you haven't. But be that as it may, as they began to have these elevated states of consciousness, their culture decided, well, we're just going to teach this one generation to the next generation to the next generation, and this system of guru and disciple, or teacher and student, began to break out. And what would happen is this information could only be delivered or transmitted one person to the next person. It couldn't be delivered in a collective. In other words, it took a teacher, and a teacher had to have a student, and the student had to sit there and painstakingly meditate or change their behavior or listen to the teacher or sweep the floor, whatever it was. They had to go into this disciple-teacher relationship, which is not an easy one, and it takes great discipline to do that. But because of that, these elevated states of consciousness were then, the only way that this story could have continued is if the next generation actually had the experience of it, not the concept of it. Not the concept, not the, you have to do this, and this. It was like, you have to have this experience. Upon having this experience, then you are a qualified teacher. You couldn't transmit something that you didn't have. Now, these ancient yogis that did this, why they were in this state of consciousness, they had this radical realization, because they realized when the funnel of their own brain and mind opened up and it expanded out into infinite consciousness, they could see all of it, past, present, and future. It boggles the mind, but they told a story of what it is, why it is that consciousness can go way up here, and why it is that it can narrow down and funnel into a very small little painful bit of consciousness. And so the story that they told way back when, and the story that exists to this day, it's one of them. I've been introduced to many different spiritual stories. I like the Bible, I like the Bhagavad Gita, I like the Yoga Sutra, I like all these things. I like to read them and feel around for the truth of it. I think the more you practice this kind of thing, the more that when you read a story, it really resonates like that. That really feels right to me. But this story, many of the stories, this is tied for first of the most astonishing, accurate depiction of reality that I've ever heard. And so it's called the five Afflictions. It's not klesha. It's I'll think of it in a moment, but it's called the 5 Afflictions. These are the 5 horrifying, icky afflictions that humans are going to suffer. And in effect, you might call it the fall of man. In other words, almost every religion, theology, spiritual system, they all in some way or another, they talk about, well, there was God, but then all of a sudden there was a fall of consciousness. And so to some degree, all of us have experienced a narrowing or a fall or a funneling of consciousness down. Have any of you suffered in your life so far? Any of you ever been through pain and trial and tribulation? par for the course. It seems to be something that happens when all of us, none of us seem to be immune from the trials and tribulations of life as we funnel down to this infinite small, this very small little state of consciousness. But they talk about these 5 afflictions, and the interesting thing about these afflictions is they said they realized from the highest level of consciousness that every human or any state of consciousness anywhere in the universe would traverse these 5 states of consciousness on their way down to becoming small, narrow, mortal, suffering beings subject to death, sickness, and sin. All that, they said everyone would go through this. And so I can relate to that. But they begin, this great story of the 5 afflictions, it begins with the number 1 affliction. This is the worst thing that ever happened to us, and it's the worst thing that could ever happen to us. And the word that they came up for in Sanskrit is avidya. Avidya. Avidya means, essentially, if you're to break it down and translate it, the best translation I've ever heard of avidya is you forget who you are. You literally forget who you are. Vidya means clarity or being full vision, full remembering, full understanding. Video, adding an A at the start negates it. So all of us in this room, no matter how enlightened and how much good work we've done, and we're all suffering to some degree from avidya, meaning we've forgotten who we are. We're all, now I'm going to mention some qualities that I strongly believe we are, and you can test these for yourself. I believe we're pristine, immortal, spiritual, infinitely deserving, worthy children of God who have an infinite destiny of glory and goodness in them. But I forgot who I was. Whoops, avidya. And so, yeah, avidya. Avidya is something that happens to all of us. None of us in this room have a full remembrance of who we are. Occasionally, we might get a glimpse of it. Maybe you saw Yosemite or Hetchachi, or the birth of a child, or the death of a loved one, or an injury or an accident. Something takes reality. You can see through it. The avidya disappears just for a moment, but reality comes slamming back in on us because it's heavy and it's weighty. So avidya, the number 1 affliction, all the other 4 afflictions that I'm going to speak of, they develop out of this one great tree root of avidya. So when you forget who you are, what's next is ashmita. What does ashmita mean? Some weird Sanskrit word? Well, when it was translated to me, what ashmita really means, like bingo. When you don't know who you really are, you come up with a false sense of self. You develop a persona, a mask, a facade, who you think you are. And I have one of those, and I've never met somebody without ashmita. Now, in modern, perhaps Western language, we might translate ashmita as ego, personality. Now, per se, having an ego or a personality is not a bad thing. It can be a wonderful quality. It makes us unique and individual. But also there are trials and tribulations and nasty restrictions from having a false sense of self. Ashmita means a false sense of self. False sense of self means I forgot who I am, and because I don't remember who I am, it's like all that's left is to make something up as I go along. And now here's the weird thing. There's a word in German, a great German philosopher of the early 20th century, Heidegger, came up with this phrase, and I really dig it. And I can't say it in German, it's one of those 19-syllable German words, but essentially it means thrownness, Thronness, thrownness, meaning we're thrown into reality. Do you guys recall choosing your parents? Do you recall, I'm going to live in the 20th century, I'm going to be born in America, I'm going to be a male or a female, I'm going to be born in this culture, I'm going to be born in, I don't remember doing that. So once upon a time, I don't know, when I was 2 or 3, it was like, where the hell am I? How did I get here? Why did I choose these parents of all? I mean, you got to be kidding me. But or maybe I chose the best parents ever. Be that as it may, I was thrown into something. Now I'm subject to all the the nature of my reality. What religion, what spiritual system, what lack of religion, what economy, what politics, what education, what dysfunction, what function was I born into? Well, that's all forcing me down into this narrow, limited sense of self, of who I think that I am. Now, some people, that narrowing or ashmita or reduction into a personality, it's by no means a bad thing. Maybe you had perfect parents, perfect education, perfect wisdom delivered to you all the time. There was no trauma, abuse, or dysfunction. Just kidding. But be that as it may, Ashmita kicks in, and now I'll just use myself, I have a false sense of self now. What it seems like from a sense of Ashmita, the sense of Ashmita, as described by many great yogis, is the feeling of being very small in a very large environment. Now, did any of you go out and look at the stars last night? And it was like, there's a lot more of all of that than there is of this. That's all I can say in terms of ratio. There's a lot more out there than this. Does that make sense? In other words, I'm a small bit in a very large system. And, well, heck, that's difficult. That's challenging. And now something else kicks in. It's called instincts, drives, and desires. Well, I got things, I got needs. I got instincts. There's some things that I want. And then when you're really small and you look out in the world, there are these other people out there, and they want stuff too. They want stuff, and sometimes they want what you want. And then guess what kicks in? Competition? Or maybe you're not very good at competing. So your strategy is, I'm not going to compete. I'm just going to be passive aggressive. I'll pretend to be nice, but I'll just take stuff behind. Whatever it is, you come up with some system of getting some of your needs met as best you can. Now, in my reality living so far, I've noticed some people are really good at getting their needs met. They seem to be functional, normal. They can get the stuff that they want. Other people are terrible at it. Now, I'm a mixed bag. I've been like, I can do some things. Some things are like, why aren't they getting that? The frustration that builds up from that. Now, because of Ashmita, and because we're small, and because, have any of you in your life growing up felt needs, desires, and instincts that you would really like to get met? Please raise your hand if you've ever had this experience, that there's something that you want to get out of reality. Great. All right. Thank you for admitting that. So, if that's the case, and I'm a small little being, and the world, the universe is infinitely vast, the great yogis of antiquity who developed this model of reality said, now, there's two more hideous afflictions that are going to kick in. Bummer, okay, and these two hideous afflictions are called, the first one's called raga. Raga. What the hell does raga mean? Raga means I see something that I like outside of myself. In other words, I see a person, place, or thing that I really like, and I really like it. And so what raga is, I see something outside of myself, and I reach and I want to grab it. I want to get it. I want to pull it in. I want that person, place, or thing, guy, girl, bank account, job, reputation, something, and I see it outside. And because it's not, I don't have it yet, then I have to marshal my instincts and my current humanly resources to reach out and grab it. And once grabbing it, I pull it into my reality. And now that I've finally captured it and pulled it into my reality, my job, my reputation, the plaques on the wall, the bank accounts, whatever that is, now that I have it, well, now what I have to do? I got to protect it. I got to build walls around it. I have to get enough insurance. And now I'm beginning to build my pile of stuff. This is my pile. And everybody else is trying to build a pile. Now it's like, their pile is bigger than my pile. Not sure I like that. We should develop an institution or agency that can divide up everybody's pile more equally. Mostly not to take mine, but so I get enough of theirs. So this is raga. You see something outside of yourself, you pull it in, then you got to insure it, and you got to put it in the bank. Any of you ever had the experience of struggling really hard to get something that you want, and then even getting it, and then having it in your life, and then guess what Ashmita thinks? Guess what false sense of self thinks? This is the most important thing in the world. This thing that I have, this agglomeration, this accumulation of molecules is God, so to speak. And it's the most important thing for me is to keep my stack intact. Keep your hands off of my stack. That's raga. Now, these great yogis of antiquity, they said, by the way, all you humans coming up in the next few thousand years, you're going to go through this. And we're like, how did they know that? Because they went through it too. They know this from personal experience. What's the next aspect of raga? It's the flip side. This is mind-blowing to me. I just want this to sink into me. The other side of raga is devesa. And devesa is this brilliant strategy of looking out into reality and seeing what you don't like and trying to push it away from you. Isn't that smart? My primary job in life is to use my intellect, my ability to identify things. And I'm going to look, I don't like that. I don't like him. I don't like her. I don't like the way that they think. So now I focus all of my energy and attention and I push that away from me because it makes it go away. Now, I'm sure all of you have identified things in current reality that you don't like, and you've been pushing it away, and guess what? It's all gone. Isn't that convenient? The politics you don't like, the people you don't like, whatever it is the disease you don't like, whatever it is, the scarcity that you don't like, we push it away. And what the strange thing is, maybe you've heard the spiritual saying, that which you resist persists. It gets stronger. It is so bizarre, and now quantum scientists, if you study any of that, there's something called the observer effect. Whatever you look at builds in reality. It builds in, the hallucination becomes more real the more you stare at it. So we silly humans who have funneled ourselves down, we forgot who we are, came up with a false sense of self. We're clutching and grabbing desperately for what we want, like a drowning person grabbing for a life preserver. We're scanning reality for what we don't hate. We're going to pay more attention to it so that we can push it away. It's like recipe for disaster, recipe for suffering and misery. And this leads to the fifth great affliction, which it has a sub-theme and it has a larger theme. The word is abhinavesa. Now, technically speaking, abhinavesa means fear of death, because if you've forgotten that you're an eternal, immortal, spiritual being, ongoing forever, a child of God that could never be extinguished, if you forget that, all that's left is to be an Ashmita. And you get about somewhere between 70 to 100 years roughly. And no matter how much you grab and pull in, and no matter how much you push away, guess what's coming? The grand prize of existence is death and extinction. Hell yeah. Isn't that great? Isn't that just good news? It's like, and so all that's left, I don't know, and Ashmita, fear of death, has every sub-theme of fear within it. Fear of losing money, fear of losing looks, fear of losing reputation, fear of losing my health, fear. In the recovery movement, there's one of the most remarkable lines that I've ever heard. It says, we suffer from 100 forms of fear, and now this is the human condition. That, the great yogis of antiquity saw that we would be living 2,500 years hence in the future. Humans would be suffering from these afflictions. And damn if they're not right, collectively and individually. They created this model that said, from infinite consciousness, avidya, forget who you are, come up with a false sense of self, hopefully a good one. Hopefully you got a good mask, a good facade. Hopefully you're pretty good at getting your needs met. You can kind of reach out into reality and become clever at grabbing what you want. And you're getting better and better at seeing what you don't want, and like building walls and pushing against it. And yet the more we see what we don't want and push against it, all it does is reinforce it. I don't know if any of you have had this experience, but the things that I read, whether it's a person, place, or institution, if I resist it, it seems that my life force seems to be fed into it, and it vivifies it and makes it more real. It sucks. And what all that leads to is the delightful experience of being in a great deal of fear, or at least in some fear. So, that's the fall of man. Those are the 5 afflictions. Now I'm going to give you the cure. I'm going to give you the remedy, but not at this retreat. But the ancient yogis from this elevated, they were so, here's a spiritual thought for you. Say you're in a 100-story skyscraper and you lived on the first floor and you knew the experience of being on the first floor of the skyscraper. But now there are people on the 38th floor and the 74th floor, and there are even people who had elevated to the 100th floor. The curious thing about being on a higher level is that you can't see above you, but you can see everywhere that you've been so far. And so this is the case of consciousness. As consciousness raises, expands, grows, and increases, we can all of you can tell stories about what you've learned in your own consciousness, your own trials and tribulations. This is why telling stories like this is so powerful, because we can really only teach from experience. But what the ancient yogis discovered is that this collapse of consciousness, they knew that we were going to go through this, but they were all kind and compassionate and loving enough to be able to tell a story like this. But mercifully, I mean, if the story ended right here, we'd kind of be screwed. You know, too bad. That's that. But now, each and every one of us, while we haven't been immune from the fall of consciousness and the narrowing and the constriction of consciousness, none of us is immune from our inevitable expansion and increase back to our true nature, because we're all going to make it back to our new true nature. All of you have begun the journey of moving back up into your true nature, and that's a wonderful milestone in the life of a soul. They realize, wow, I've kind of bottomed out. I've kind of played the material game as far as I can take it. So now what's of interest to me is I realize I'm a small bit of consciousness, but I can continue to expand and grow forever. And so the ancient yogi said, good news for you, once you understand this model, that everyone is going to go through it. No one's immune. You can't talk your way out of it. You can't buy your way out of it. You can't get enough material excess to prevent yourself from going through it. Once you realize it, then we finally wake up to what the answer is. Okay. If the number one affliction is forgetting who we are, the solution is to remember who we are. Go. Remember who you are right now to the degree that you can. But now here's the thing. All of us are involved in remembering who, all of us have a spiritual program or something we do, or a church, or a synagogue, or a place, or a community, or yoga, or retreat, or prayers, meditation. We have a spiritual toolkit. All of us are engaging it in some way, but ultimately what it's all doing is it's all bringing remembrance. And in yoga, that's vidya. Now, it would be so super duper convenient if just knowing this story, we could have instantaneous remembrance just all at once. Now, there are stories in human history of humans who do remember this all at once. They're very rare, on the order of 1 in a billion. And it may not even be the best way to get it, because it's so radical and so stunning. When a consciousness remembers all at once who they are, oftentimes it just kills you. It's too much. So William James, the famous American writer, psychiatrist of the early 20th century, he described a brilliant concept, and he called this remembering. He called it, what's better is something called the educational variety. You get it bit, by increment, by aspect, by increment, by little teeny step. And that's really the way most of us do it. But what you can do on occasion, now you could go have a near-death, go climb up El Capitan tomorrow, just free climbing, okay? Because you might have a near-death experience. Or go eat a big handful of psychedelics. Am I advising you to do this? No, I'm not. I'm not advising anything of the kind. This is between you and your own teachers and understanding. But I do believe there are things that we can do that bring about what I would call radical remembrance. What facilitates radical remembrance? Telling this story. Most people this hasn't occurred to them yet. So telling stories with friends around a campfire on a retreat is one of the most radical, revolutionary, quickest ways to do this. And it's not about quick. The longest distance between 2 points is a shortcut. I'm not sure that we can accelerate this any faster than what it's meant to go, but I'm quite certain what I can do is I can delay my remembrance forever. In other words, if I engage in my older thinking, my older behavior, my older ideology, what I grew up with, who I think that I am, my guilt, my shame, my dysfunction, my addiction, my problems, my character defects, if I'm always in that, then I'm not very much engaged in remembering. So I have to get together with other people, and I've sneakily arranged to do this on yoga retreats, where we go to exotic, pristine locations where you can get this proof. You get a proof. And when you get a proof, then you have proof that this is real. And that simply by remembering this truth about yourself, because if I'm engaged in forgetting who I am, I'm an unworthy little speck of DNA on an insignificant planet in a very boring solar system on the wing of a very average one of trillion galaxies, the Milky Way, if that's all that I am, and a little insignificant speck, and that pretty soon I'm going to be dead, and there's no real meaning and purpose to this. If I'm doing that, if I'm thinking that, and there are a lot of people who do think that, and I'm not blaming anybody because I have thought that, and occasionally I do think that. I think that, I don't know, maybe I am just an insignificant little bit of DNA with no real, and then I go, where's that leading me? Is that helpful? Is it making me feel better about myself and what I'm doing and who I'm doing it with? No, I have to actually practice remembering who I am. Now, yoga is the practice. Is it putting your feet behind your head? Yes. Is it laying on a bed of nails? Yes. Is it being buried in a box and holding your breath for 3 months and coming out just fine? Yes. Yoga is all of that. But what yoga is, what these great masters of antiquity discovered, yoga is the practice of remembering who you are. And sometimes people hear this even one time and they go, wow, what a brilliant model of reality. I've heard many models of reality, and there are many beautiful ones. I've never heard one that's so accurate to me in my own experience of funneling down into a kind of a small, desperate, fearful, limited, restricted, everything I want is out there, and there's a lot what I don't want in this push-pull of reality. Push that away, pull that in. The strain and struggle of doing that all the time. Now, here's some really good news for you. When you remember this, you begin to go back up the funnel. What does this mean? When you remember who you are, you don't have to push and pull to get your heart's desire. You don't have to do that anymore. What's very interesting is, instead of being a small, insignificant being way off in a far corner of the universe, isolated and separate, here's the truth of the universe, and this is true in astronomy. The universe has no center. There's not like the center of the universe it's over there. It all started over there. There's no center. The universe has no center. What does that mean? You are the center of the universe. Now, do you remember when you were a kid and maybe one of your siblings would say, you're not the center of the universe? Well, now call them up tonight and say, actually I am the center of the universe. But you know what that means? That means you're the center of the universe too. Now, what does that mean when you're the center of the universe? It means that you're a focal point of infinite reality and you expand out in all directions, and yet so does everyone else. Now, when you realize this, what you realize you don't have to push and pull on reality anymore. My neck, back, and shoulders got so tight from doing that. I feel the echo of living in raga and devesa and ashmita and all that forgetting of who I am. I'm starting to come up out of the quicksand. Now, one of the things that ancient yogis said, when you realize this, no more raga and devesa, no more pushing and pulling. What you do is, by getting quiet and centering yourself, the universe beats a path to your doorstep. Meaning your own personal destiny, your dreams, your desires, these great impulses that are planted inside of us, clearly by a power greater than myself, what it is that I want to accomplish, what my mission, my purpose is, what yours is for you, individually delivered by the infinite. That's your destiny. That's coming your way, and the only thing we can really do is either align with it or push it away. The curious thing about human beings, narrowed down to the bottom of the funnel, they're actually fighting their own destiny. They're actually pushing it away. Isn't that horribly paradoxical? What they really want and love the most, they're actually preventing it by a stew of disbeliefs and misperceptions about reality. But now you guys are yogis. You're practicing remembering. Now, as a result of that, what you're going to find, slowly but surely, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, this will materialize, is that all the promises of reality are going to come true. What does that mean? You're going to find yourself in your true place in life. You're going to find yourself in the place where all of your natural, God-given, I could say 50 different ways, talents, gifts, abilities are put to their greatest use for the expression of your own love and well-being out into the world. And all that means is that you bring heaven on earth, to put it into old-fashioned religious language. Now, what's my experience of life? How do I relate to this? For me to be in this room at Yosemite, teaching yoga to my friends who are high-minded, uplifted, cool people, are you kidding? Cut back 28 years ago, what I was doing for a living, I was exactly 180 degrees off. I couldn't have been going more anti this direction. In other words, I had ridden the unhappy train, forgot who I was, false sense of self, struggling to get what I want, trying to find any means to get it, push away what I don't want, and then living in constant fear. So I can only tell this story from my own experience. Now, as a result of kind of hitting that bottom, and we all metaphysically do that, and we start to move back up this funnel and things expand, it's like, damn, if I'm not just hanging out with people that I love, doing things that I love, moving, and, well, sometimes I go, well, you're not a yoga teacher, you can't teach yoga, it's like my brain, blah, 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 but it's like I have a weird amalgam of skills. I'm weird and wacky and wonderful, and so are you. Each and every one of you have a gift and a skill and ability that once we begin to remember who we are, it can't be stopped. Nothing can get in its way. It doesn't mean we're not going to have trials and tribulations moving forward. It just means anytime we run into a trial or tribulation, we're going to remember it's generally the effect of one of these afflictions. I'm trying to get something that I really want by grasping for it, struggling or competing, and I'm straining myself. Or there's something I really hate, or somebody or something that I'm going to push against it with all my might, and that's going to lead me to fear and worry and dread, and it's going to be like, oh, stop doing that. Take it easy. Easy does it. Everything is always working. No, that's a bunch of bullshit. Everything is not always working out. No, wait. I'm actually the biggest problem in life. I'm the person that gets in the way. My own brain, my own consciousness, and having realized that, all I need to do is eradicate myself. I'm kind of addicted to I'm not much, but I'm all I think about. Okay, so this remembering, one of the ways that I have to do this, and I'm going to conclude with this, one of the ways that's most radically efficient and effective for me for remembering who I am is I have to hang out with other people. I can't isolate in my room and think about my problems a lot. Because when I do that, when I pay attention to what's wrong with me, they get bigger. That is the principle of Devesa. So what I got to do is I got to go to yoga or go to my meetings or go on retreat, call up a friend. But what I'm looking for in my life right now, and I believe the law of attraction, the real law of attraction, the way that this works, when you really begin to remember this, you're only going to want to hang out with people that are going to help you to remember, not to forget. Because many friends, even with the best of intention, they want to dive into the problems and struggle and make it worse. And guess what the road to hell is paved with? Good intentions. The road to heaven is not paved because nobody walks on it. So what I do, I'm very committed at this point. I don't know how many years I've got left. 40, 50? I don't know. 20 minutes? I have no idea, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time with people that don't want to remember. I want to find people that are going to remind me when I'm struggling and troubled, because when I'm lost in one of these afflictions, if I don't talk to, I got to get on the phone, talk to somebody else, and I'm going to find first of all, they're going to listen to me. They're not going to, I felt that way, I know what that feels like, that's no fun, I can relate, but sooner or later, they're going to gently turn it around and say, well, what might you learn? What good is coming from this? Have you said a prayer? Have you done any journaling? Have you thought about maybe helping somebody else out and getting outside of your own head? And I'm like, no, I actually haven't thought of doing that. But all of my friends remind me, all of you remind me who I am. Every time I look at your face and your eyes, you guys remind me who I am. Now my job is to remind you who you are. And I'm going to do my best. I'm going to use a wild amalgam of weird skills that I've developed over my years to do my best to use words, thoughts, images, but mostly my own experience and storytelling to remind you who we are. And then we gather in environments like this. And somewhere in these 3 days, you may have already had it. You might be having it now. You'll have it tomorrow. But because you intended to come into this environment of intense, radical remembering, because you asked for it, you're going to get it. You can't stop it. Yay. It's really good. It's going to be delivered to you custom. The cosmic piñata is going to open up. Problems you've been struggling and wrestling with for a long time are going to clear up in the process of life itself. And you know what that's going to lead to? The next big set of fun problems. So you can grow and expand more. But then you'll have more resource and you'll get stronger and healthier. And then your experience will help others and other people will help you. And then you're going to start these weird collaborations. You're going to meet people out of the blue who are going to like, oh, I like that idea. I'm going to help you with this. Or you want to start this orphanage, or you want to do that, or you want to do this, or you want to write that book. And it's like, it's weird. It's almost like there's adoption. It's so weird. But anyway, what's the name of these people that live by this river? The river was called the Indus River. And what were those people called? Hindus. Well, Hindu sounds like a strange, weird, alien name of people that live way over there. No, they live by a river, and they decided to meditate, and they achieved what we can all achieve, amazingly, astonishingly. Our consciousnesses can all grow to the point where we fill up all of consciousness. Yogis call this God consciousness. But it can also contract and contract and contract and contract and get so small and painful and suffering and misery inflicted. And so all of us are like, but I'm kind of into like, but always expanding and increasing. That's what we're doing here this weekend. So thank you for listening to this story of the afflictions, but do remember to remember. Do remember to remember. And do remember to remind everyone that you know, especially if they're coming to you with like big, hairy, juicy problems, I want you to listen with love and compassion. I understand, I've been there, that's so negative, that's awful. But to some degree, don't buy into it. It's like, you're actually an infinite, spiritual, loving, amazing, astonishingly powerful being capable of infinite consciousness, and that by realizing that, any problem you could ever face will be dissolved almost instantaneously, and you'll be restored to harmony, love, and bliss. I'm not sure I would put it in that language. That's how I might put it. But you might here's what you might say: everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. Thanks for coming. Do you have any questions about the story or anything? Okay.
I was thinking about the brain shutdown. Like, is it certain centers of the brain, or like the whole, we have parts of our brain that are working, without our...
I've got an idea for you on that.
It's interesting.
Well, here's something they discovered in the last 14 years. and they discovered by shoving people into fMRI machines and studying their brain for any number of afflictions. But one of the things they discovered in these fMRIs, these brain imaging, they discovered that no matter who they put in the machine, no matter what their experience was, when the person in the tube really began to relax, in other words, when their mind went on idle, a certain part of their brain would light up consistently for each and every one of them. And this baffles, what's that part of the brain that when anybody's like on idle, it's always on, and mine has a certain signature, yours has a certain signature. What's common is we all have one. What's different is this part of our brain that lights up, we all have that. They gave it a name. They called it the default mode network. It's one of the most astonishing discoveries, because what they discovered about the default mode network is like, once that mechanism is built in our brain, it's like, it ain't changing. It's like that cake is cooked, it's frosted, so maybe your default mode network got shaped when you were 7 years old through the most perfect upbringing. Maybe there was a little trauma or abuse or tribulation, and then that might have shaped it. But neuroanatomy up until roughly 50, 60 years ago, once your default mode network is set in place, you're stuck. You're Ashmita forever. What do I mean by what I just said? You are this false sense of self for the rest of this lifetime. But now, modern neuroanatomy, of course, there's neuroplasticity. Through meditation, through spiritual work, praying, chanting, mantra, Reiki, going on yoga retreat, walking, exercising, all these things that we're doing, the default mode network is actually, it's malleable. In other words, we can develop a new sense of self. We're not stuck in that mode, but that's probably the most base level of brain that most of the neuroanatomists are talking about, the default mode network. Now, there's a very highly materialistic cadre of neuroanatomists who don't think the default mode network is malleable or adjustable. It's like, too bad. In fact, I like to watch the other side of arguments. I like to steel man other people's arguments. To me, it's one of the best things that I can do for my own critical thinking skills. I like to listen to the other side. And then I like to try to listen to their argument and go, okay, all right. And then why is that possibly true? Why do they maybe know something that I don't? I really do try to exercise this. So I was listening to a neuroanatomist, and when he realized there was this thing called the default mode network, he basically just moved to the country and said, screw it. There's nothing, this is who I am, and anything I try to do, I have no free will. So I am just gonna like eat some food and hang out and, pet my cat. But this multi-doctorate neuroanatomist is going, yeah, default mode network, you're screwed. You don't even, there's a large cadre of philosophers who say we don't have free will. Now, like Isaac Bashevis Singer said, I have to believe in free will. I have no choice. Because to me, free will is the quality of being that God planted inside of all of us. I can cooperate, I can resist, I can choose, I can make wonderful decisions. I can make some pretty nasty decisions so far, but they all bring about this memory. But anyway, that's the deepest part of the brain that I've heard about. Yeah. But I also think that this is so weird. Okay, you're probably going to rush out of the room or grab the pitchforks or something. You don't need a brain to be conscious. There are studies of people that literally have no brain or have had large chunks of their brain removed in accidents. There's a story of somebody who had just a little bulb of a bird, just a little teeny little thing, not all the different layers, perfectly conscious. How do you explain that? How do you explain that when you die and your heart stops and your brain is showing zero activity, people are reporting experiences 1 trillion times more vivid and real than this so-called reality. It's so real, and their brain is not operating. Now, whatever model that you're going to use to explain that, you got to come up with something. It's either the dying gasp of a last-second brain, or our brain is just this hilariously convenient filter of reality. And that actually, while it's I like having Sometimes I like having a brain, let me qualify that. Sometimes I like having sometimes I don't. It's not good, it really hurts. But it's quite apparent to me that we don't need the brain is not the producer of consciousness. The brain doesn't make consciousness in the way that my liver makes bile. The brain is a filter. It's much more like a TV set. And each night, I'm turned into Greg TV 24/7. Like, are you kidding? And now you're turned into your TV set. And the weirdest thing of all is all of our individual TV sets, somehow they blend into one amalgam of a great big show, a great big simulation, a great big reality. And whoever invented that, wow. Wow. So, and I'm a little teeny bit of that consciousness, and now that I'm learning, I can sift and sort through reality, and I can like find things that I love and lean in that direction, and I can see things that I don't like and lean away from that towards what I do love, and then that becomes more real, and I find more people to get to know, and I don't feel so isolated and scared and frightened, and sometimes I do, but I've got friends who will generally help me out. These are good things. And this is what the Hindus said 2,500 years ago. So it's a fascinating model of reality. Is it the only one? No. Sift and sort. Models of reality. The map is not the territory. Sift and sort. But when you find a model that really clicks, really fits, it's amazing how many things it will answer that were previously confusing or unanswerable for us. This model of reality, for me, opens up so many answers and clarity on questions that I've had my whole life, and it only unfolds into more and more. Every day I get another little drip of this, and every day I get a little more of this. Reality gets a little more smooth, a little more harmonious, a little less fearful. And I've seen it. Now, it would be one thing if it worked for me, but I've seen, as a yoga teacher, I'm seeing it, I just see it happen all, boing, boing, ding, boing, boing. Well, I'm a Christian, I'm a Jew, I'm a Buddhist, I'm an atheist, and I don't care. Go ahead. Just find something that you love greater than yourself, participate in that with all your life. I'm an unabashed universalist. Sooner or later, God's going to reel us all back in, no matter how hard you try. But it all just boils down to love and remembering that. And I can forget that so fast. Like driving down to Groveland today to mail off an envelope. I've got 11 minutes to get there and 11 minutes to get back. And I get on that road, and there's a slow car in front of me. And I'm like, that bastard. And I instantly forgot who I am and who they are. Out of my way. I don't know if you guys have ever felt this. Out of my way. That's mine. Out of my way. Anytime I say out of my way, it's like, I'm going nuts. I'm going crazy right now. And it takes less time for the crazy to go away. There's a reduced time frame of crazy and a little bit more sanity. I've taken a lot of your time. It's an interesting story. Please share any models of reality that you have. And next time we get together, there's more fun models like this, but I love telling stories like this with high-minded people who are really interested in remembering who they are. And as a result of being here, the people who didn't come to this tonight, not too bad. They're going to remember too because they're hanging out with you. Anyway, have a great night. Yoga tomorrow. Remembering practice tomorrow at 7 a.m.